The galaxy bled in silence. Trade convoys vanished without a trace. Border colonies, once vibrant, now floated as debris fields. Planetary governments issued pleas for aid that dissolved into static. The criminal plague had metastasized, unchecked and unchallenged, into every corner of known space. Syndicates once operating in shadows now ruled openly, with planetary governors kneeling to warlords and slavers. There were no rules anymore, only power. The Vraxor corsairs struck from cloaked asteroid fields, stripping ships and leaving airless wrecks. The Crimson Maw reveled in blood, broadcasting executions across stolen networks. The Grell Confederation turned entire species into bonded labor, their markets flourishing in lawless sectors. These factions weren't isolated threats. They were a hydra, each decapitation spawning 3 more heads. Peace treaties meant nothing. Armadas vanished overnight. Diplomacy had turned into theater, meaningless gestures while systems were enslaved. The Galactic Council, ancient and bloated from centuries of bureaucracy, proved useless. Their defense fleets, once feared, now rusted in dockyards or defected entirely. Generals gave orders no one followed. Emergency summits devolved into shouting matches, blame games, and cowardice. The people, those who still lived free, had lost faith. Even mighty civilizations like the Eltari and the Braxon began sealing off their territories, hoping to ride out the storm. One by one, strongholds fell. Sector-wide communication was interrupted by jamming networks controlled by pirate queens and AI warlords. The criminal syndicates weren't chaotic, they were coordinated. Someone, or something, had united them behind a single strategy: isolate, conquer, and consume. Fear was no longer a weapon, it was the status quo. In a rare private session, the Council faced the truth. No internal force could stop what had become a galactic infestation. Not their fleets, not their laws, not their treaties. A dozen proposals were made: diplomatic outreach, mercenary contracts, sanctions. All failed. The criminals laughed at threats, assassinated negotiators, crippled stations with kinetic strikes. One delegate proposed the unthinkable: Earth. The word hung in the chamber like a virus. Humanity was not a council member. Their entry had been blocked for decades. Too aggressive, too young, too unpredictable. But they were feared. Everyone remembered what happened at Belron 4, where human forces had annihilated a superior alien fleet using guerrilla tactics and orbital deception. Rumors abounded about their cyber warfare divisions, their black ops programs, their refusal to lose. They were isolationist, yes, but capable. The vote was not unanimous, but it was passed. A private message was encrypted and transmitted through quantum relays. It contained only the highest priority diplomatic code and a single line of text. We request deployment of specialized countercriminal assets under full discretion. Compensation negotiable. Time critical. The Council waited. For 6 standard days there was silence. No reply. Some members began to panic. Others claimed Earth had rejected the call. Then, at exactly 0200 Universal Standard Time, every Council terminal received the same short transmission. Contract accepted. Assets en route. There were no further messages. No arrival schedules. No strategic coordination. Just that single response. Hours later, long-range sensors across half a dozen sectors detected strange warp signatures. Silent, fast, almost impossible to track. Entire pirate fleets disappeared within hours of their last recorded location. Syndicate strongholds stopped responding. Communication hubs went dark. The Crimson Maw's second-in-command was found crucified to the hull of his own flagship, drifting in orbit. No declarations were made. No demands issued. There was only a message burned into a steel plate, bolted into the bridge of a captured Corsair vessel. Your time is up. Across the galaxy, fear changed shape. For years, it had worn the face of criminals and killers. Now it wore a black helmet and moved without sound. The galaxy didn't know who Earth had sent. But soon, everyone would learn what happened when humanity's hunters were loosed. They weren't called soldiers. Not officially. Soldiers wore uniforms, operated under treaties, and followed orders from diplomats. What Earth sent were something else, honed tools shaped for a single function. They were the result of decades of planning, forged in secrecy across black budget programs and off-world testing grounds. Their name wasn't widely known outside classified EarthGov networks, but among those who needed to know, they were called MERCS, Mobile Exo Recon Combat Specialists. Earth hadn't developed them to fight wars. Wars could be won or lost in public. MERCS existed for problems that couldn't be acknowledged. Operations where plausible deniability was as vital as firepower. Comprised of former special forces, war criminals who chose service over execution, AI-integrated tacticians, and genetically augmented operatives, they were equal parts myth and method. Every one of them had survived operations that should have been final. The kind of survivors who didn't talk much and didn't need to. Their training took place far from Earth. Antarctic drills hardened them against extreme cold. Martian domes taught them to breathe in environments where one mistake meant death. Orbital zero-G labs honed their ability to fight and move in null gravity. Simulations ran for months without interruption. Combat scenarios, interrogation resistance, live-fire stealth testing. Weakness wasn't corrected. It was purged. When the Council's request was accepted, Earth didn't hold meetings or call press conferences. There were no ambassadors sent. Instead, encrypted directives were delivered directly to MERC Command. Dozens of teams were activated in silence. Ships that didn't exist on any registry launched from black sites buried beneath oceans and ice caps. No insignias, no beacons, just fast, dark vessels packed with apex predators. The first target was a Corsair hub orbiting the shattered moon of Corum. It had resisted Council fleets for over a decade. Intercepted comms showed the pirates weren't just entrenched, they were expanding. Human orbital drops began 12 hours after MERC teams arrived in system. By the time local sensors detected anything, it was already too late. The operation lasted 47 minutes. No survivors. No damage to nearby civilian structures. When a salvage crew arrived weeks later, they found the command deck stripped clean. No signs of bodies. Just a blood-stained human playing card nailed to the captain's chair with a combat knife. From there, the campaign accelerated. MERC deployment struck with surgical precision. Each team operated autonomously, selecting their targets based on intelligence streams no other species could access or decipher. They exploited vulnerabilities even the criminals didn't know they had: supply lines, black market tech caches, communication nodes buried in asteroid belts. They moved like ghosts, coordinated through silent bursts of quantum-encoded data. To the Council, it was miraculous. To the criminal underworld, it was a nightmare made real. Entire Grell labor fleets vanished mid-jump. Maw executioners were found dead inside sealed panic rooms. Their own defense systems turned against them. One high-profile slaver lord was publicly flayed on a pleasure world. His corpse left displayed with a single human phrase etched into the stone beneath him. "We collect." The aliens began whispering about them. The Faceless ones. The Earthborn. The bounty ghosts. Rumors spread faster than facts. Humans who could hack alien minds, who fought without emotion, who didn't sleep. Superstitions took root. Ships altered their routes to avoid suspected human patrol zones. Some pirates even turned themselves in, hoping for protection in council prisons. But not everyone ran. The criminal syndicates had survived for centuries. They hadn't done so by surrendering. They adapted, analyzed, and fought back. Human signatures were studied. Engagements dissected. Traps were laid. Bounties were issued. One particularly bold faction captured an MERC transport ship, broadcasting the event across a dozen systems. They executed the crew on a live stream and challenged Earth to respond. 3 days later, the station was gone. Not destroyed, erased. No explosion. No debris. Just silence where it used to be. Humanity didn't gloat. No propaganda was issued. No flags were planted. There was only the mission. And the mission wasn't about vengeance or control. It was about one simple thing: profit through order. Earth didn't want to rule the galaxy. It just wanted it functioning. Criminal chaos disrupted trade. Trade affected economic networks. Disrupted networks cost credits. Credits were everything. For MERCS, the motivation was simpler. They weren't patriots. They weren't heroes. They were professionals. The best. And in the darkest places of the galaxy, the idea of professionalism became a weapon all its own. The message was clear. The hunt had begun, and the universe would never be the same. The syndicates underestimated how fast the tide would turn. They had survived wars, crushed rebellions, outlasted entire empires. But they had never faced enemies like these, hunters who didn't posture, didn't negotiate, and didn't stop. What followed was not a war. It was an extermination. In less than 3 galactic cycles, 63 major criminal strongholds were neutralized. Not assaulted, neutralized. No drawn-out sieges. No weeks of attrition. Targets simply stopped responding. The Vraxor fleet over Telsin Prime lost contact with its forward scouts. Minutes later, command ships went offline. Emergency protocols triggered, but by then, the bridge crew had already been taken. 0 casualties on the human side. No broadcasts. No demands. Just silence. MERCS moved through every layer of the syndicate machine. Tactical, logistical, financial. They hit drug dens, data, smuggling centers, deep space forges. A team on Jorval, 6 posed as buyers, extracted intel, then called in orbital precision strikes while walking away. Another group intercepted an arms convoy, hijacked it, and used the stolen weapons to level the manufacturing plant they were intended for. Every operation was a statement. We know how you work, and we're 10 steps ahead. No one in the galaxy had ever seen tactics like these. Human command algorithms anticipated escape routes before the criminals even considered them. AI-assisted analysis tracked patterns invisible to organic minds. Local authorities tried to follow the movements, but were always too late. MERCS operated in micro-windows of time. Hit, vanish, relocate. One moment, a pirate ring controlled 5 sectors. Hours later, their infrastructure was rubble and their leaders missing or dead. Those who survived spoke of terror. A bounty hunter who didn't blink when shot. A black-clad operative who dismantled an entire command squad with a blade and walked away without a word. Syndicate captains went underground. Communication between factions became sporadic, paranoid, desperate. They stopped trusting each other. Some began fighting amongst themselves, accusing rivals of feeding intel to the humans. The Grell Confederation, infamous for enslaving entire populations, suffered a crippling blow when human teams liberated 3 breeding colonies in a coordinated triple strike. Entire generations freed overnight. The Grell retaliated with a fleet push, but were intercepted en route by human strike ships that didn't exist on any records. That fleet never reached its target. Their wreckage floated in interstellar space, scuttled with clinical precision. Fear shifted. For decades, it had been the criminals who dictated the terms. Now it was the humans. Not because they said so, but because the evidence left no room for doubt. When an MERC team left a zone, the area stayed quiet. Survivors either fled or vanished. Whole sectors began to fall in line. Smugglers stopped moving. Mercenaries turned freelance work down. Even corrupt planetary governments began purging themselves, hoping to avoid attention. The MERCS didn't celebrate. They weren't built for glory. They moved on. And when traps were set, when desperate crime lords tried to bait or ambush them, the result was always the same. Complete operational failure for the attackers, followed by total asset seizure and targeted retribution. One trap on Zinther involved over 500 hired guns and orbital mines. Only 2 humans entered. They walked out alone. Everyone else burned. But the most terrifying detail wasn't the violence. It was the discipline. No collateral damage. No civilian deaths. Clean, calculated, efficient. Criminal propaganda tried to paint them as monsters. The truth was worse. They weren't monsters. They were professionals who made monsters disappear. The mythos grew. No one saw their faces. No one knew their names. Some believed they weren't even human. Maybe machines. Maybe genetically engineered constructs. The mystery only amplified the fear. One transmission, intercepted from a Crimson Maw outpost before it went dark, summed it up perfectly. They don't come for justice. They come because someone paid. And they don't leave until it's done. Even with overwhelming success, MERC Command knew the job wasn't over. The syndicates were fracturing, yes, but that made them dangerous. Cornered threats always were. The largest criminal alliance hadn't yet revealed its hand. Whispers spoke of a meeting, a gathering of leaders to form a counteroffensive. Earth knew it was coming. They were counting on it. MERCS didn't react to threats. They baited them. And in the darkness between stars, humanity's hunters prepared to make their next move. Not for revenge, not for honor, for contract, for purpose, and because in the vast cold void, order was currency, and chaos was debt. And Earth always collected. The summit was supposed to be untouchable, held in a gravity-locked fortress orbiting a dead star, shielded by stealth fields and defended by mercenary fleets. It was the criminals' last gamble, a final unification. Every major syndicate sent their top brass. Pirate kings, slaver barons, data tyrants, and flesh traders gathered in secret to forge an alliance they believed would end the human incursion. They brought weapons, warships, bribes, and threats. But they also brought fear, because none could deny what humanity had done in months, what no galactic force had accomplished in generations. They blamed each other. The Maw accused the Corsairs of leaking locations. The Grell claimed the Braxton cartel were working with the Council. Paranoia cracked alliances. But one thing unified them. Earth was dismantling their empires, and no one could stop it. So they planned a retaliation. A multi-front ambush using decoys, reverse-engineered human tech, and paid Council traders. It was bold, ambitious, desperate. It didn't matter. Before the summit even concluded, key defense nodes started failing. Not all at once, just enough to sow confusion. Security drones stopped responding. Surveillance footage looped old feeds. Communication scrambled. Then came a silence. Not from outside, but from within. One by one, transmission lines from the delegates' private guards went dark. No alarms. No gunfire. Just gaps, missing time. When the Fortress's command AI attempted a full systems check, it found nothing wrong. Everything read normal. But it was already too late. By the time a single external signal was broadcast, one encrypted pulse, it was over. There was no battle, no invasion, just absence. Dozens of criminal leaders gone. Not killed, not captured, erased. Their DNA samples removed. Personal data wiped. Biometric logs overwritten. Their fleets, now headless, began infighting almost immediately. Some tried to seize power. Others abandoned their posts. A few attempted full surrender, only to find no one left to negotiate with. Earth's message wasn't loud. It was surgical. The galaxy reeled. Power vacuums opened. Chaos bloomed. And then, just as quickly, was brought to heel. Human teams, already embedded in dozens of systems, activated contingency programs. Local crime cells that tried to rise were preemptively dismantled. Black markets collapsed under algorithmic subversion. Trade lanes reopened, not under Earth's control, but under Earth's watch. The Galactic Council, stunned by the precision and totality of the purge, scrambled to reassess its own role. Humanity had bypassed their politics, neutralized their enemies, and restored order, all without permission. Some counselors called for sanctions. Others, understanding the fragility of the current peace, proposed formal recognition of Earth's authority in criminal suppression. But Earth never responded. It didn't need to. MERCS continued their sweeps. Cleanup protocols activated. Not to dominate, but to stabilize. Systems on the edge of collapse were brought back with untraceable funding, strategic assassinations, and hidden infrastructure support. Civilian governments, once terrified of syndicate retribution, began reclaiming autonomy, quietly guided by operatives who never gave names. There were no declarations of victory, no parades, no public addresses, just results. the kind that lasted. Some species questioned Earth's true motives. Why intervene now? Why not take control? But the truth settled into the galactic subconscious like a shadow. Earth didn't want control. It wanted resilience. A stable galaxy was profitable. Functional economies, secure trade, and limited conflict ensured that humanity's own expansion could continue, quietly, efficiently, and without resistance. Earth's approach had redefined power, not through dominance, but by showing that true strength didn't require visibility. The MERCS were never revealed. Their operations remained classified. Even the Council couldn't identify a single confirmed operative. That mystery became a form of control. No one could predict when the humans would strike again, or if they were already watching. Fear became discipline. Criminals who once flaunted their operations now conducted themselves with care. Bribery declined. Extortion disappeared. Planetary law enforcement found themselves effective for the first time in decades. Not because they had changed, but because they operated under the implied gaze of Earth's unseen hand. The galaxy didn't just recover. It adapted. And Earth? Earth said nothing. No gloating. No alliances demanded. The humans faded back in a myth, their vessels vanishing from sensors, their command frequencies going dark. But every smuggler, every corrupt politician, every aspiring warlord remembered what had happened when humanity's bounty hunters were unleashed. They remembered, and they stayed afraid. It started with whispers, not announcements. Remote colonies that hadn't seen human traffic in years suddenly found their systems upgraded, bandwidth increased, medical shipments arriving without explanation, infrastructure restored. When officials traced the changes, they led to shell corporations that didn't exist, funded by accounts tied to companies long thought defunct. But the pattern was unmistakable. Earth wasn't leaving chaos behind. It was laying groundwork. Former war zones stabilized. Starports rebuilt under anonymous investment groups began enforcing strict trade laws. Crime rates didn't just drop, they vanished. Not through policing, but through absence. With the syndicates shattered and leadership eliminated, the ecosystem that once supported galactic crime had been stripped of oxygen. There was nothing to fuel it anymore. The bounty program that triggered this cascade remained classified. No payouts were public. No claimants ever came forward. But records showed that hundreds of known criminals simply stopped existing. And yet, not a single bounty hunter ever sought recognition. Because the hunters weren't independent. They were extensions of Earth's silent agenda. Tools used precisely and then retired into shadow. The Council, now acutely aware of its impotence, faced a dilemma. Earth had achieved in months what Council enforcement had failed to do for centuries. Their security divisions, bloated and ineffective, looked obsolete beside what humanity had deployed. Attempts to replicate MERC tactics failed. Other species lacked the psychological conditioning, the cultural resolve, and most importantly, the willingness to do what Earth had done without hesitation. Some tried to oppose it politically. They introduced resolutions to censure Earth, to demand transparency. But the votes never passed. Even those who resented humanity's actions understood one truth. Earth hadn't disrupted the galaxy. It had saved it. In backroom meetings, Council officials quietly sought consultations. Not with Earth's ambassadors, but through dead drops and encrypted channels, hoping to learn just enough to avoid attention. The lesson wasn't lost on them. Earth had taught the galaxy that power didn't come from visibility or diplomacy. It came from readiness, from resolve, and from acting while others hesitated. Trade surged. Neutral systems once overrun by smugglers now flourished under new partnerships. Mining outposts, once forced to pay protection to corsair fleets, began exporting rare minerals at record pace. Data networks flowed without interruption. Commerce returned, not under flags, but under fear of disruption should Earth turn its gaze again. The galaxy stabilized because it understood the new reality. Humanity didn't posture. It acted, and when it didn't need approval. Inside EarthGov, there were no celebrations. No medals were handed out. Success wasn't broadcast. The MERC teams that returned were debriefed, scrubbed from official logs, and reassigned or retired. No parades, no honors. They had done their job. That was enough. But Earth remembered. Quietly, it advanced its reach, not through colonization or war, but through influence. Strategic partnerships formed with fringe worlds. Resource deals locked in loyalty without firing a shot. AI analysts monitored galactic shifts, predicting instability months in advance. When problems emerged, they were addressed before others even noticed. This wasn't dominance. It was design. And beneath it all, the MERC program remained ready. Not idle, ready. Not to fight wars, but to prevent them. The lesson had been broadcast across the stars. Order had a cost, and humanity had already paid it. Among the criminal remnants, hope of resurgence faded. New leaders refused the old paths. The galaxy had learned. You didn't provoke the humans. You didn't test their silence. Because when they moved, they didn't warn, they didn't threaten, they ended. And so, long after the last target had vanished, the story remained. Passed between smugglers and dim-lit bars, spoken of by ex-enforcers who refused to return to the shadows, feared even by those who had never seen a human face. The tale of the bounty hunters who came from a world no one had taken seriously, until it was too late. They weren't the strongest. They weren't the most numerous. But they were inevitable. Because in the vast, cold black of space, when chaos ruled and evil thrived unchecked, humanity didn't seek permission. It sent professionals.